beautiful Super Soul Sisters, and today we're going to talk about FEARR shoes. Now this is something that obviously I think has been accentuated. We've been on hyper alert for so long that, especially after the pandemic, I think there are a lot of people who were struggling with fear and worry and anxiety before we even had that side swipe come along, and it lasted for, honestly, didn't it, for like years. And, as a result, I think people are on hyper alert as a result. Like, it doesn't take much to sort of push them over the edge, really, compared to what it did before. And if you were already on edge before you went into it, can you imagine how, sensitive you were, and trying to have that, where it's so prolonged, it has quite an ongoing impact, doesn't it, on the nervous system. And fear is the worry about the future, what's going to come next, what's going to happen, look what's happened before, it might happen again, and if it happens again it could be worse, whatever the thing is, it's that mind that's going out of control about a specific topic or a person or a thing, whatever the case might be. So I use it as an acronym for the following steps. So FEA, and it's actually double R. So F is for that feeling, you get that feeling of, and that's the trigger. So that's when you start going, oh, I'm feeling a little bit anxious, I'm feeling a bit worried, I'm feeling, and that dare I say, even when people get angry, it's underlying that anger is normally a fear. So as much as people go, oh no, it's a separate kind of emotion, typically there's a fear that actually I found that is driving that, for whatever reason. So that feeling that you get is actually identifying. Remember, we were talking about how important it is to identify what is actually causing you to feel that way. First, identify the feeling. Is it, and then I would be also saying, look at the scale of 1 to 10. Where are you sitting at? Just how fearful are you? Just how angry or, upset are you in that, just like how bad is it? And then if you can identify exactly what it was that actually started it. Now, the reason that I'm saying that is that sometimes you will find that it's a compounded effect. So remember I was talking about how we find when we're younger, we have a situation sometimes, and what we do is we stack it. We find more evidence, or it happens over and over and over and over again. So it's kind of a layered effect, a compounding effect. So really, it doesn't take much to push someone over the edge and get fearful about something, because it's actually a stacked reaction, if you like, of multiple experiences or multiple events that have happened, or imagined as well. Sometimes they're not even real, and that's when it has happened but it's not as bad and it's been blown out of proportion. So it's getting that exactly what's set you off this time. Is there a history, and how far back does it go? It can be really helpful to sort of get an idea, because it's like, wow, I had no idea that it went that far back. I was like, oh, actually, when I think about it, yeah, I did get scared about heights, or that person, and that's actually quite a big one. I might just say is that when sometimes people get triggered by someone, they say, I just don't like the way they look. And it won't be that it's them, it's that they remind them of somebody that they didn't like, or people who made them feel negatively or fearful. Or it might be the way that they acted reminded them of the way that other person acted, for example. So be conscious of that, but just get aware. First of all, it's all about awareness, isn't it? It's like, oh, I didn't even know that I just know that I'm feeling fearful, but why? And then try and get to the root base, if you can, of what it is that's making you feel that way. Then it's E, which is ego, and I know it sounds unusual, but it's really the ego trying to get hold of you to keep you fearful in order to get control. So there's a part of you, that wants to have it a certain way. It's what, Eckhart Tolle talks about, how the ego tries to run everything. It gets fearful. It doesn't want you to be in that, you know, it lives in a space of that flight, fight, reactive quite often. So just understand that it's the part that's wanting to gain control for whatever reason, and just acknowledging that the ego is playing out. So it's like, well, do I really want you to be taking charge right now? Does it make me feel better? No. So let's maybe not do that. And then it's a case of talking to that side, that, you know, dismantling the ego to the point where it doesn't have that level of negative impact on you. Then the next one is A, which is actually ants, ANTS, which Dr. Amen talks about with his process. Now, I don't know if you know him. He's a TED Talks guy, and he talks a lot in relation to brain damage and its role in like ADHD, depression, neurological issues, but normally psychological, because he's originally a psychologist, and he landed up scanning brains and seeing that there were these holes in the brains for certain conditions, and including depression. So he's worked a lot with people who struggle with depression, taking it from the brain aspect. And he speaks of ANTS, so ants, and I think it's automatic negative talk. So those are the equivalent of my parrot shoes. So if you go back in the channel on YouTube, you'll see that there's a parrot shoe. So there's a video, you can go and have a look at that. But it's really that repetitive record that we tell ourselves over and over and over again. And we can have positive ones with my parrot shoes, but he's talking purely negative ones. So the ants that he's talking about. So my equivalent are the parrot shoes, that negative, you know, it could get worse, you know, it could be, you know, we're making mountains out of molehills with our parrot shoes on, aren't we? So it's that whole thing of being aware that, oh, when I get fearful, am I letting this run away on us? You know, like, is it, you know, we've got to put our owl shoes on. That's another video that you can go have a look at, where you step back and you observe and you go, facts. What are the facts? You got the Sherlock shoes. Put your Sherlocks on and you go, right, the facts are that's not actually happening, or only this happened and it was really, really small. And I've made it mean this, this, and this, and this. By the time you've talked yourself into a frenzy, of course you're going to be fearful, aren't you? So it's being aware of when that pattern's kicking in for you. It's like, I acknowledge my fear. I understand that the ego is trying to take control for whatever reason. And I'm not open to playing that game with it. What is the parrot shoes that I'm wearing? What are my ants that I'm talking about? And if I've actually got my ants on, then we take our Sherlock shoes and we investigate and go, right, what are the actual facts? Like, it might be that, for example, it might be, I'm not feeling very well, or and then people say, I've got pneumonia, and you're like, you've got a sniffle, it's like, and then I might die because I got pneumonia, and you're going, well, okay, for starters, you don't have pneumonia. You've got a slight sniffle. Take some vitamin C and get some good rest and rug up so you're nice and warm. So it's that classic case of making it bigger, that big step, overstepping that I was talking about in those shoes, is like we go too far, and that is because we've gone into a downward spiral with our parrot shoes, going, well, it could mean this, I could have sniffles, I could have the lurg, the dreaded lurg, it might be that or see all the evidence that supports that people don't survive this, or whatever it is, and that, like, oh, now I've got pneumonia, or they talk themselves into, I don't know, but they get into such a whirlwind downward spiral that it's like, oh, whoa, slow down. So get on top of your ants, or your parrot shoes, as I call them, and start interrupting the pattern, going really realistically. So when you've got your owl, which is observation, you can go, no, actually, you've just got sniffles. You're okay. We're sweet. You don't actually have pneumonia. Then the R is for the raster shoes. So if you haven't listened to that video or watched it, maybe go have a little wee listen to that. That's your reticular activating system, which is part of your flight fight mode. It works with the amygdala, and the whole process of that is what you land up focusing on. So be careful what you're focusing on, because the more you look for yellow cars, remember we did the little yellow car exercise, suddenly you're going to see yellow cars everywhere. If you hadn't noticed it before, you are now. So you can use your rasters, shoes and glasses for positive things, but you can also have it where it's working to your disadvantage. So if you focus on the wall, yes, you will hit the wall. If you keep telling yourself you're sick, your body's going to eventually go, well, actually, you know what, you're right, maybe you do have pneumonia, let me give it to you, boom, you know. So it's that kind of or make you vulnerable enough to be able to be in that position where that could happen. So being fearful can be brought back into control, where it's actually, I'm not going to be fearful, I've chosen, I'm not going to do that. And then the last R on top of that is repeat. Rinse and repeat. So you go back into and you play that whole cycle again, over and over and over again, and it becomes that downward spiral, and you just go round and round and round and round. Not good for anybody. And then you become really fearful. So be conscious of that process. Like when you feel fearful, remember the acronym for that and go, okay, let me break it down into little steps, and what can I do to stop that? And if you need help, then go for it. I mean, if it's something you really are genuinely fearful about, then you know you probably do need to get some help with coaching wise, so that you can break that pattern so it doesn't keep cropping up for you, right? So it's really, really useful when you use that little acronym. It's like, oh yeah, or they're fearful, you know, you can use this with other people. It's like, wow, they're really fearful, just is, you know, and then walk through that process, and you can also help them as well. Now, the other thing that you can do is, you know, once I've got all my, you know, emotional resilience toolkit available for you that you can have in your little handbag, you can use those little tools as well that will totally interrupt that pattern right straight off the bat. You know, it just goes, instead of having to work through it all and, you know, decipher you can just use the tools, and that will get rid of that you know, that panic, that fear that's overwhelming, so that you're able to get more calibration, that you can get more balance. And it's you know, I know it sounds like a shortcut, but that it is actually a shortcut. But what I would say is that you still need to work on what the triggers are, so that you can make sure that you're not triggered again, so that you're having to repeatedly use the system to dismantle it. So it's certainly a number of tools in there that you'll be able to use for this type of thing as well. Hope you found that useful. Your shoes, your path, your way. And I am looking forward to meeting you one day in person. And yeah, feel free to chat to me in the VICKI Jane Facebook group. Totally free to join. Namaste.